For this morning's talk, I wanted to keep one of the promises which I gave during question time and talk about Maitri Bhavana, Metta Bhavana. It is one of the types of meditation along with the other three of the four Brahma Viharas, but it is not my main form of meditation. Metta, yes, but never really developed karuna, mudita, upekkha as meditation objects. So I'll confine myself to what I know, which is the development of metta. For karuna, mudita, upekkha, have to find some other teacher if you wish to develop those. Whenever you are a monk or a nun, a lay person, developing the Dhamma, please remember that even in the time of the Buddha, some teachers were very strong in one area and weak in other areas, which is why that sometimes the monks would go to many teachers to get strength in, say, your Vinaya teacher, maybe your Metta teacher, your Anapanasati teacher, your Dhamma teacher. So don't always think that just one monk is going to give you everything. This is not like one of these superstores in Colombo where you can go in there and get everything you want. So, but nevertheless, I do a lot of metta, and there were three types of metta bhavana which I'm going to be encouraging today. Usually, again, I get my deep meditations from Anapanasati, and so one of the ways I do metta, two ways, which I'm going to talk about this last of all, are doing metta with the breath, which I found very, very powerful, combining the two. And the other way is once the breath meditation is very, very still, and you leave the breath alone, you've got the delightful breath, then I can turn to metta, and it's very easy and very powerful. But the standard way of doing metta bhavana is to have a little commentary which goes on inside of you to develop feelings of loving kindness. And you can have many different types of recitations which you do. You know, may all beings be happy and well, may they be free from suffering, may they be free from affliction, may they not be separated from their happiness, may they be well and successful. Whatever particular words you say has to be repeated many, many times, because it is quite common for many people to have difficulty with metta meditation, especially the males. Females again are more in tune with emotional world, sometimes too in tune with it, going over emotional. But with metta meditation it's sometimes very difficult to do, which is why that sometimes monks find it much easier to do things like a super meditation, meditation on the loathsome, on the foul. Sometimes as monks it's very easy to get into the loathsome meditations, but the metta meditations are a bit more difficult to do. And because as a young monk I was trying the normal way of doing metta meditation, trying to may all beings be happy and well, and may they be free from suffering, may they be free from pain. And I'd be sitting in the forests and the jungles of northeast Thailand, saying may all beings be happy and well, they may be free from suffering, but I just couldn't do it. It was too difficult. So I changed the mantra, changed the recitation to make it easier. I say, may all beings except mosquitoes be happy and well. May all beings except mosquitoes be free from suffering. Because those mosquitoes were driving me crazy, and I didn't really feel they deserved my metta and loving kindness. Because you can understand what I mean, that sometimes as a young monk, there are some things which are always so irritating, it's sometimes hard to give them metta straight away. Which is one of the first things to understand about metta. There will be obstacles to metta, the things which, you know, unless you're an anagami, the things which you dislike and feel repellent, repugnant, you know, like as a young monk, mosquitoes. Because especially those mosquitoes, I mean, they were almost like sadistic. They never actually just bit you. They actually flew in your ear first of all, buzz, 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 just to announce that soon you're going to get bitten. And not only that, they did take advantage. I remember many times, you know, being bitten by a mosquito, spreading metta to it. So, okay, have some blood. I've got plenty of blood. and it's only a small little itch. No, take some. But what those mosquitoes used to do, and I'm sure the mosquitoes in Sri Lanka are the same as the mosquitoes in Thailand, they would land on, say, your hand, and they'd put their nose down. It would sting a little bit, but not very much. But then they wouldn't like that particular place, so they'd walk a few inches and go in another hole, and then another hole. They were taking total advantage of my metta. So just take one hole and don't be so fussy. So there's mosquitoes, and they do that in Sri Lanka too. Yeah, okay, yeah. So even mosquitoes have craving and are choosing what they want. So because of that, it was so difficult to have loving kindness towards things like mosquitoes. So I had to develop a different way to actually develop loving kindness. And I realized that when you do loving kindness to all sentient beings, it's just too difficult, because there are some sentient beings you find it very difficult to have loving kindness towards. So standing back, reflecting and using my intelligence, my wisdom, I decided to begin loving kindness with easy objects. So I chose objects which was very simple to develop metta towards, not the hard ones, not all sentient beings, but a class of sentient beings I found it very easy to develop loving kindness towards. And I'm not sure why this is so, maybe because I was born in England, and maybe it's because of my conditioning, that many people have little pets, and the type of pets which I like the most are little cats. So, I have an affinity with cats, not so much with dogs, but with cats. And especially every now and again that somebody dumps a cat in monasteries, they usually get adopted, and I usually look after it, and they sit on your lap. And so the cats, I've got an affinity for cats. I have lots of kindness towards cats. So what I started to do with my Metta Bhavana is to sit down, close my eyes, get my body comfortable, and then just do a little bit of present moment awareness and silence, just to settle myself down. And then I would begin my Metta Bhavana by visualizing a cat, especially if it was a cat which I knew, which was a pet, to visualize it in front of me. And then it was very easy to wish that being loving kindness. My dear little cat, may you be happy and well. May you always be at peace. May you get lots of fish to eat, because cats like fish. And I made it up in my own words, so that way I could actually encourage the feelings of metta towards this being, which was very easy to develop feelings of metta towards. And once those feelings of metta were strong, that feeling of caring, protecting, goodwill, loving kindness, then I could actually choose a more difficult object. And I usually chose one of the monks who I knew and grew up with, and developed loving kindness towards those, because like cats or dogs, they're very, very loving. Especially they say dogs, if you have a dog as a pet, even if sometimes you hit it, it will still come back and lick you. It's so faithful and loving. And it is an unconditional loving kindness which these pets have towards you, especially dogs. So it's an easy thing to give loving kindness towards. If you give loving kindness to one of your fellow monks, sometimes they still argue with you. Sometimes they still disappoint you and they do things wrong, because that's the nature of human beings. So it's easy to start with a little animal, but then to give loving kindness to someone which is a bit harder. Your best friend, maybe in the Sangha. And then something a little bit harder. And then something a little bit harder. And then last of all, well actually not last of all, almost last of all, then all sentient beings, including the mosquitoes, or whatever else you find very irritating, or some enemy you may have in the world. Because you find if you started off with an easy object, and then build it up on harder and harder objects, that when you do get to the very difficult objects, it's easy to suffuse them with loving kindness. I call this the simile of lighting a fire. Because when you're lighting a fire to maybe sort of boil some water, you have to start with something which easily takes a flame, like newspaper. You just put a match to newspaper and it just burns straight away. So that's like the little cat. It's very easy to give loving kindness towards you. Just think loving kindness and straight away the loving kindness is there. And then after you've lit the piece of paper, then you put small twigs on top of that paper. We call that kindling wood. very thin pieces of paper, which again very easily take the flame, but a little bit harder than paper. And once the little thin pieces of wood take the flame, then the thicker pieces of wood, and then the thicker pieces of wood. And then when you have that little fire of little pieces of wood, then you can put the logs on. And once you have the logs on, then even some wet logs which you drag from the forest, you can put that on. And because it's a hot, roaring fire, even the wet, sappy logs dry out and start burning. And that's how you light a fire. But if you start holding a match to a wet, sappy log, it's impossible to burn. Which means if you try having loving kindness towards your worst enemy, it's impossible. You have to start with easy things first of all, and build and build and build and build up until they get to the big things, the difficult things. And that's the way which I've taught and developed Maitri Bhavana, to start one object at a time and build and build and build and build and build. But sometimes, just going back to the simile of lighting a fire, sometimes you put too much wood on and it burns out. So what you have to do, you get the paper out again and put the paper in and light it again. That's just like when you go too fast with Maitri Bhavana and the metta starts to disappear, you've gone too fast. And then you have to go back to your primary object. For me, it's my little kitten or cat. So I go back to a cat, get feelings of loving kindness, and just quickly start again. It's not like starting from the beginning, because once you've lit a fire, you've got enough heat there, but it's not enough to keep it going. So you just need a tiny bit more heat just to get that fire going until it is a roaring fire. So that way that sometimes you have to come back to your primary object to get feelings of warmth and kindness and care towards, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds. And once that is very hot, again, any object you can put onto that fire and it takes the fire. Any person or being, even the one which you hated the most, once you get feelings of strong loving kindness going, even they, you can give loving kindness towards, and it changes your whole perception of them. But as you're developing that loving kindness, instead of just having thoughts and thoughts and thoughts, I always, I think I mentioned earlier in that tale from Lao Tzu, that seeing a sunset is different than paying attention to the words. Experience a beautiful sunset and saying what a beautiful sunset are two different things. But the words are like signposts, they point to a direction. So you've got the signposts here, cottages 4, 5, 6, 7. That sign isn't a cottage, it shows you where to go to find that cottage. In metta meditation, may all beings be happy and well, may all beings be free of suffering, or may my little kitten always be happy and well and warm and protected, have no enemies. Those are just words, but they point to the experience, the feeling of metta. And it's that feeling of metta, that perception of metta, which is what we should be really developing, using the words to develop the perception. I'll give you a little example here, and many of these examples I hopefully will help you if ever you become teachers, because you'll be teaching young monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, and sometimes they're very stubborn, it's very hard to teach them. So sometimes we do have these little tricks and techniques which we develop to get people to understand what you mean by the perception of metta. So what I usually do, I sit them down, I say just calm down, do a little bit of meditation, I'm going to say some words, and after the words I'm going to pause. I want you to experience what happens when the word finishes. Like metta, 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 or maitri if you wish. Because after a word is said, actually the mind looks in that direction. It follows the directions. And after you mention that word, metta, you actually start to feel what metta means as a perception. I use other words like that. Let's use a negative word. Hate. 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 After a while, the mind doesn't, you can't resist. Actually, you go towards what hatred is, and you can start to feel it as a perception, as an experience. So when you do start practicing Metta Bhavana or Maitri Bhavana, you can actually say this word, may my little cat be happy and well. And you pause to see what those words mean. Perceive the direction in which they're going and the experience which happens as a result of those words. And say the words again. And feel the perception of metta again. And every time you repeat those words, the perception of metta, what it actually is, not as the words which describe it, but what it actually is as an experience, as a perception, gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that is one of the most important parts of metta meditation. It's not the wood which you're burning, but it's the heat which you're generating. It's not the may all beings be happy and well, but what it actually means, the heat of metta which that creates. And once you start to get to feel this metta, you'll find that like most of these mental objects, that they have a reality in the mind, what metta actually is. They also have a corresponding sensation in your body. For metta, it's usually a beautiful feeling around the heart region, a sort of a tingling in that heart region. And so I ask people to be mindful of when you do metta meditation, what is the feeling in the body? What does it feel like? Because that gives many people something they can experience associated with the perception of metta. Now just to go on a sideline here, I've used that little truth that every emotional feeling has a corresponding physical feeling to very successfully deal with people who have fear or anxiety. And sometimes monks, we have anxiety, we have fear. And the place where I developed this was with a student of mine, a young girl, maybe 19 or 20 years of age, who was in Adelaide University studying dentistry, and she started to suffer panic attacks. Now panic attacks can occur anywhere without any warning. You may be in a temple, you may be just in the street, you may be just in the shops or at work, and suddenly you freeze with terror and anxiety. And it's so debilitating that people just cannot do anything. It's like a momentary madness. And some people have these panic attacks and anxiety disorders so strongly that they can't even leave home. It gets worse and worse and worse. Sometimes people give you drugs, but often they don't work. And this poor young girl, she suffered from anxiety disorder, panic attacks, and it got so bad that she couldn't even leave her bedroom. She was bedridden. So she could not go to any lectures, nor go to any classes, do any work. She was at home, bedridden, just losing time with her studies, and also losing time with her life. But fortunately, her uncle was a close disciple of mine. So the uncle told me about her, and told her to give me a call, because I was in Perth, she was in Adelaide. It's about 1,500 kilometres apart. So she called me up and said she was bedridden, she had panic disorders, and nothing was working. The doctor, the psychologist wasn't helping her. And so I started her treatment. I said, when you get the panic disorders, where do you feel it in your body? She said, I don't know. I said, give me a call when you find out. I gave her something to do. A few days later she gave me a call and said, yeah, I've had many panic disorders since I last called you. I feel it in my chest, just, around this region. And I said, what does it feel like? Describe it to me. She said, I don't know. I said, when you can describe it to me, give me a call back. So it's like giving her classes, some work to do. So when she called next time, she described the feeling, the sensations in her sort of stomach when she had a panic attack. She said, marvellous. Now what I want you to do is get your hand and massage that area next time you have a panic attack. And when you've done it a few times, give me a call back. So a few days later she gave me a call back. Said, yeah, I did what you said. You know, I just, whenever I had a panic attack, I felt the feeling now and massaged it. I said, what happened to it? She said, I don't really know. When you find out, give me a call back, which he did. And she said, it was amazing. When I sort of massaged the area, all the feelings in the chest just disappeared. Because that's what you do. And you can massage. You've got aches and pains, stiffness in the body. You massage it with a bit of loving kindness and gentleness, and it's lessens and disappears. I said, what happened to your panic emotion? And that's when she paused. She said, it disappeared. It vanished. I said, exactly. And that's what you have to do from this time on. Every time you have a panic attack, don't try and control the mind. Because if you control the mind and try and control the panic, it gets worse. And that's actually why people get the panic attacks. They get a little bit of fear and they try and control it, and it gets worse and worse and worse until it becomes unbearable. And they freeze. They all lock up. But I said, forget about trying to control it in the mind. Those emotions of panic, anxiety, fear, they do have a corresponding emotion or feeling in the body. Deal with the feeling in the body. It's much easier to deal with. Massage it, relax it, and you'll find once the corresponding physical feeling disappears, the emotional feeling will also go as well. And she did that, and in a couple of weeks she was out of bed. In a month, back to university, and she got first class honours. And she was so impressed with me that there is this medal we have in Australia, the Australian of the Year award, and she wrote up and entered me in Australian of the Year. No chance of getting it. That goes to movie stars, you know, like Nicole Kidman and stuff like that, not monk stars. But nevertheless, that was just her gratitude, because it got her out of a very difficult psychological problem very easily. But I mention that story because maybe you may have some disciples who have panic disorders or fear disorders, or you may have fear yourself sometimes. If you have fear, anxiety, there's always a physical feeling associated with that. Notice that physical feeling with mindfulness. Give it loving kindness, massage it, relax it. When the physical feeling goes, so does the mental feeling. But I mention that as an aside because when you have loving kindness, real metta, it does have an associated physical feeling. And for many of you, it's much easier to deal with the physical feeling. Not in this case to get rid of it, but let it grow. The physical manifestation of metta, to increase it and increase it and increase it, till your whole chest is like tingling and on fire with this beautiful feeling of metta, or rather with its corresponding physical feeling. So as you're building up the fire of metta, sometimes at first we know it as a physical feeling. But after a while, when we have lots and lots of experience with the physical feeling of metta, we understand what the emotional feeling of metta is. And that's an important thing for monks to develop. Not the thought of metta, not your description of metta, but what metta actually is, what it is you're describing, what it is that word is pointing to. So you actually feel metta, you know what metta is. Because there's many of these things which exist in the mind are so difficult for us to know. But as we develop metta meditation, we understand what metta truly is. And once we know what it truly is, as a perception, a mental dharma is a mental phenomena with a physical counterpart. Once you know what the mental phenomena is, then we can really, really develop it very, very strongly. So we develop it that way until it gets very, very strong. And one of the very skillful ways of developing it is actually, as a mental object, is to imagine it as a golden light. Now you may say imagine it as a golden light using your imagination, because imagination and truth, especially when you get into meditation, are not that far apart. And I'm mentioning this because these are mind-made objects, things like nimittas, so is imagination. And actually you can use that skillfully. Another aside, one of my disciples over in Perth had a very difficult time watching his breath. No matter how we taught watching the breath, present moment awareness and silence, then watch the breath, just let it come to you. He had such a difficult time doing breath meditation. And he found a teacher. I don't know who this teacher was, but he was obviously very brilliant and very skillful. He told this man, and this was an Australian man, sit down, just relax your body. Now don't try to watch your breathing, but just imagine you're watching your breath going in and going out. And so that's what he did. Now can you imagine just watching your breath going in and going out? And after a couple of minutes, the teacher said, what are you watching? And the man looked. It was his breath. Imagining you're watching your breath soon becomes watching your breath. The imagination creates the reality. As a very skillful meditation teacher. Now, I'm going to tell that to you. If you are, say, in the delightful breath and you haven't seen a nimitta yet, just imagine you're seeing a nimitta. Imagine you're seeing this beautiful white light. Imagine. And then pause. What are you watching? And now you've got a real nimitta. It's a very brilliant, skillful means which understands the nature of the mind. If you try, you can't do it. Imagine you can, and you do. This is actually what is used in sports psychology today. Before the cricket match, they get all the Sri Lankan cricket team, all the bowlers, sit down, close your eyes. Imagine you're bowling and you're taking a wicket. Imagine you're taking a wicket. Imagine you're taking a wicket. And they take the batsman. Imagine you're hitting a boundary. Imagine it. Sit down. Imagine that ball coming to you and you're striking the ball and it's going straight to the ropes. And that works. It actually creates the reality. And the opposite. Okay, sit down guys. Imagine you bowl the ball and it's hit for 6. And then you do fail. That's the nature of the mind. Imagination is like a power of the mind which we can employ. So for those of you who want to mess around and try some more skillful means, you can try that. If you haven't got to a deep state of meditation yet, don't go too far. Don't imagine too far ahead of yourself. Just imagine maybe the next stage. Imagine what it would be like to see a nimitta. Imagine what it would be like. Just close your eyes and imagine what it would be like to see a nimitta. There's a good chance you might get a nimitta. So in this particular case, you can imagine what it's like to sort of have loving kindness. Use that, and it works, because you're actually creating this thing called metta. Imagine you've got like a golden light, and that golden light is the way you perceive metta. And it's actually very accurate, because most people, when they do metta meditation, they do get the nimitta of a golden light. It seems to be the classic description of the metta nimitta. Because when you're developing metta, you get a beautiful feeling in your chest, and you're sending loving kindness to all beings. But you're also, it is associated with very strong piti sukha. Piti sukha comes up very easily with metta. It's its nature to have lots of associated piti sukha with it. So as you're developing metta, may all beings be happy and well, may all beings be free of suffering. You get this beautiful, soft piti sukha arise, and you can visualize it as a golden nimitta. Imagine it's that. And then you're taking the metta meditation into the jhanas, into the deep meditations. You're using loving kindness at first, just in its coarser form, on all beings. But now you imagine it's golden light, beautiful energy, piti sukha. But when you're imagining the power of metta, as I said earlier, the perception of who you're sending this metta to has disappeared. When you're developing deeper meditations, you have to simplify. So there's less details there. It becomes closer to one pointedness, one thing, rather than many things. If it's me spreading loving kindness to somebody else, There's three things there. It's source, me, the object, and what goes between us. If you take the me off it, and take the object where you're saying this metta to, and just have metta without an object, then it becomes a very, very strong nimitta. It becomes immense piti sukha. Very beautiful golden light, because that's the nature of metta. Once you get there, once you get a nimitta, it's very, very rare to have a metta nimitta which is dull, or which is not beautiful, which hasn't got any piti sukha. By its very nature it has power, which is why it's very useful. And of course, from that nimitta it's very easy to go into the jhanas. And as I said a few days ago, once you're into that jhana, it doesn't matter from what route you've arrived at that jhana, through breath meditation, through kasina's meditation, through metta meditation, that jhana is one and the same, and it can develop into deeper meditations afterwards. It's just what happens. The longer you stay there, the more it settles down, the more it becomes still, the more the water in the glass settles, the deeper the jhana is. And that's how you can do metta meditation, leading all the way into the jhanas. It also has, obviously, the other benefits, because even though many of you live in hermitages, you do have to rub up against each other now and again. And even in the Sangha you have very high morality, great ideals and wonderful sort of dharma to live up to. Still, every now and again you have arguments, you have people who dislike you, you dislike others. That's the nature of life. Even in the time of the Buddha, monks were like that. So it really does help in the Sangha to have some loving kindness towards one another, to develop that. Otherwise you'll spend too much time worrying about what that person said to you. I did hear from Prem that even on this retreat, one monk arrived on, was it on Sunday, found there was another monk he didn't like here and so decided to leave. That's crazy stuff. Come on, you're monks. You should have enough loving kindness that if your enemy is here, the monk who really upsets you, wonderful. Because that's going to be my challenge. As Ajahn Chah used to tell us, I already say how much I hated the mosquitoes. And when I went up to see him and asked him, can we have some like mosquito repellent or nets or those mosquito coils which keeps the mosquitoes off? He said no. Just, it says you have to have the mosquitoes. But they hurt so much and they're so irritating. I'm just about to get into jhana and they whack me. It's unfair. That was an exaggeration. But he said, no, from now on, he said, call the mosquitoes your acharya. Because that's what Ajahn means in Thai, it means teacher. So from now on, call them Ajahn Mosquito. They're your teacher. So if you have a monk who really irritates you and gives you such a hard time, he is your teacher. He is your Ajahn. Ajahn, nasty monk. Because that's what tests you, learns how to be tolerant, learns how to forgive. So if there's anyone in your room who always snores so much and gives you such a difficult time, who always slams the door and always coughs at the wrong time in your room and always slurps his food, if that's someone in your room, he is your teacher. Teaching you some loving kindness. Because once you do develop that feeling of loving kindness, it does actually help you being able to forgive and be tolerant of other people, and also to be forgiving and tolerant of yourself, and of the lay community who look after us, and the animals and the birds and the dogs who bark in the middle of the night and wake you up so you can't sleep. All of those irritating beings, through loving kindness you can let them go. And that this especially becomes important if any of you eventually become acharyas yourself. One thing which Ajahn Chah used to teach us, he said, if ever you become a teacher, it's not just your wisdom and understanding of meditation or your attainments. You have to develop a lot of metta. If you don't develop metta as a teacher, you may be very wise and experienced, but you will not be able to impart those teachings to anybody else. Metta is one of the most important qualifications of any teacher or any leader. And obviously, one of the reasons I've come here to teach this retreat is not just to teach you to become good meditators, but to teach you to become teachers. That way I can retire and have an easy life. So it's important to have that loving kindness. And it also, you have all these wonderful stories, especially about monks who live in the forest, who develop loving kindness. And you know, there's so many dangerous animals in the forest. Snakes and bears and tigers and other beings who look at you as their dinner. You're their dana. And so what do we do with these? There's some great stories. One of the monks, he's still alive, and he's one of the monks who has immense metta, loving kindness. And this was his story, that he was meditating in the jungle in Thailand with a few other monks when a king cobra came. Now, I've only seen a king cobra in the wild once, and my goodness, it was a huge snake. Now, over 10 meters long, really thick as your thigh. It was a serpent. And when you first see these big animals, you rub your eyes, am I really seeing this? But it was true. There was a big black king cobra snake. Now, in the jungle, just at evening time, a cobra came. Or I should say that, that in all parts of the world, we have the national language like Sinhala, but I'm sure that you have dialects in Sri Lanka as well. Northern dialect, southern dialect. Now in that part of Thailand it was a northeast dialect. And they had a special word for that king cobra. And in English it translated as the one-step snake. One-step snake it was called. And the reason they gave it that name was because if it did bite you, that's all you had left to live. One step and you're dead. That's why it's called a one-step snake. It was incredibly venomous. So, this snake crawled up to this senior monk, this great meditator, lifted up its head, opened its hood. Now that's the other thing I'm teaching you to give Dharma talk. If you do things like that, it wakes people up. I've seen so many people fall asleep during Bhanga. Right in front of his nose. And I ask people, what would you do if that happened to you? Would you get up and run? And I think, you live in the forest, you know that those snakes can outrun you easily. The first time I saw snakes go fast, it scared me. I remember seeing this was not a venomous snake, it was a big python I saw. I saw it, it saw me. We eyeballed each other for about 10 seconds, and that snake went off. It ran so fast, or it slithered so fast, there's no way I would be able to keep up with it. Those snakes are incredibly fast when they want to be. So you don't outrun King Cobra. So what this monk did, he had loving kindness, strong metta. He lifted up his hand and he patted the King Cobra on the head, saying, "Thank you for coming to visit me." And what did the King Cobra do? King Cobra loved every minute of having his head patted by a great monk. It was so rare to get your head patted, especially by a holy monk. King Cobra was so happy. All the other monks saw that. And of course the cobra doesn't bite you if you're patting it on the head like that. And after the King Cobra had his head patted enough, he drew in its hood, put his head down, and went to visit one of the other monks. And the other monk said, "Go back to him, I'm not going to pat your head." And that's a true story. And of course, no snake is going to bite you if you have loving kindness. Now, of course, sometimes people ask, what's your story, Ajahn Brahm, of metta and snakes? And my favourite story, being in the jungle, and do this all-night meditation on Poya days. So one day a week we wouldn't sleep, we'd meditate all night. I think that was not such a good idea, it was just too tough. And sometimes you got good meditation, but most of the monks learnt about sloth and torpor. But nevertheless, you can imagine you haven't slept for about 24 hours, and you've been meditating all night, in the hall. And the first thing in the morning, you go out to urinate. Now this was in a forest, just the monks. So you know what you do, you just go and urinate in the forest. You don't use the toilets. So I squatted down, in Asian style, squatting down, and started urinating. Now it was the first light of day, so it wasn't that clear, and my mindfulness wasn't that strong. I was tired. So you can imagine why this happened. I thought I was urinating on a stick, but then the stick started to move, and I realized I just peed on a snake. And it was a very venomous snake. Not only that, but as all you males know, the most sensitive area of my body was only a couple of inches away from the mouth of that snake. You know what part of the body I mean. That was very dangerous. But of course, because I had metta, that snake never bit me at all. In fact, to this day, I'm sure that snake enjoyed its early morning warm bath of holy water. Do you have holy water in Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Well, you can't get more holy than straight from a good monk. And of course, snakes don't bite you, or animals don't hurt you if you've got loving kindness. But if you haven't got loving kindness, I wouldn't try that. That snake might bite you. One of the other beautiful stories of loving kindness was one of the Thai monks. He's dead now. Again, he was walking on the Charika through Thailand, and he came to an area of the forest which was very good for meditation. You'd always go to the nearest village first of all to tell the village that you're there, so they can expect you on alms round in the morning. And the villagers showed him this nice piece of forest and said they would be back in maybe a couple of hours to have a Dhamma Sakacha, have some teachings on the Dhamma. So he set himself down under a beautiful tree, started meditating, when he discovered he'd chosen the wrong tree because it was a red ant's nest. It was very close by. And you know what red ants are like. They crawl up you and start biting you. So they started crawling up his legs and biting him. But he was one of these forest monks, these good meditators. He was just, I'm going to endure this. 10 ants, 20 ants, 60 ants, all biting him. And then even though he was a great monk, the next thing he knew, he was running away. He didn't know how he got up from his seat and started running because his mindfulness was totally lost at that time. And off he was running because it hurt so much. But when his mindfulness returned, he thought, this is the wrong thing for a disciple of the Buddha to do, to run away. So he went back and sat on his cushion in the middle of this swarm of red ants. But he changed his Gamatana, his meditation object, from breath to loving kindness. May all beings, especially red ants, be happy and well. And they all started crawling up him, biting him. May they all be happy and well and free of suffering. And soon, when his metta started to get strong, they stopped biting him. And he felt them crawl the other direction, down his legs, until he felt the last of the ants crawl away from his body. And then he went into a very beautiful meditation, the metta jhana. When he came out afterwards, because he determined a couple of hours, that's when the lay people were coming to listen to the talk, he opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was the lay people were dancing. And he thought, this is a very strange custom, that when people come to visit a good monk, they dance. I know it was actually the case that in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, how the Buddha's, after he died, the lay people of Kusinara, they worshipped the body with music and dance. That's in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And he thought, maybe that's what they're doing to me. But then he saw the dance wasn't because of some music. The dance was because they were being bitten to death by these red ants who were encircling him. He saw this huge sea of red ants, but just around him, just like a 1 meter radius circle, there was no ants at all. Those ants were protecting him because of his loving kindness and metta. And that was the story of Ajahn Lee and his loving kindness towards the ants. So you may be able to try that. If you have any ants crawl up you, or any snakes come into your hut, you may say to that snake, "Snake, may you be happy and well. May you be free of suffering. May you always be delighted. But somewhere else, please, not in my hut." That becomes like the loving kindness. So it can take you into beautiful meditation. It can protect you from all sorts of problems and troubles. But I also wanted to talk about the other two ways I do loving kindness meditation. Because if you want to develop loving kindness, sometimes if you start from the very beginning and just start visualizing a little animal or something or someone who's very easy to develop loving kindness towards, yeah, it can work, but it's hard work. So these days, because I've developed the meditation on the breathing, what I usually do, I develop the breath meditation, usually to the state of the delightful breath. Because I've got a little bit of piti sukha out. I've got the delightful breath, breathing in, breathing out, but I haven't developed that too much yet. If I develop that too much, I can't help myself, I just go off into nimittas. So you've got full awareness of the breath and start to have some delight on the breath. And then you change the object to loving kindness. Because you have sufficient focus, stillness of the mind, and the loving kindness, the piti sukha of the delightful breath means you've got enough mental energy, then you start thinking, may all beings be happy and well and be free from suffering. And of course, once you are at that stage, you turn over to loving kindness. It's so easy to do. The mind is actually prepared, through what you've done on the breath, to develop metta. And it's very helpful, because if you find it difficult to get piti sukha up with the breath, you may get to that stage of full awareness of the breath. You can see the breath from the very beginning to the end to the beginning. So the end to the next breath, beginning of the out-breath, the end of the out-breath. You can see it very clearly, but there's no sort of oomph to it, no piti sukha. Then maybe from that point you can switch to Maitri Bhavana. And that will give you the joy and the happiness, because that is a strong feature of Maitri. It always has joy and happiness with it. So you can switch from there. And that's what I've usually done. And I've taught others to do that. But before they lose the focus on people and go into like a metta nimitta, sometimes I've asked them to choose somebody, maybe someone they live with, or a good friend back in your monastery or your hermitage, someone who's not here. Visualize them and zap them with loving kindness. Really drench them with metta. Give them the full works of metta. And then I tell them what the time was they did that. And I ask them, this is a beautiful little experiment to test. Next time you see that person, or if you're a lay person, give them a call on your phone, have sort of small talk, and in passing ask them, at that particular time, what were you doing? And it's amazing just how many people report back that at the very time that you really drench a good friend, or maybe your mother or father back in Europe, with loving kindness, they feel it, they receive it. You give them a call and say, Father, what were you doing at that time? Son, that was amazing, I was thinking of you, I felt so good thinking about you, so proud of your remark, I felt so wonderful. You can can actually do that, and it works, if you send loving kindness, even halfway around the world, if it's very, very strong, they receive it. And I love doing experiments like that, just to convince people that these things actually work. You can give loving kindness at a distance, and it is received. So if you don't believe that, try it out. When you have strong loving kindness, think about somebody a long distance away. Spread that loving kindness to them. Check the time and the date, and sometime later, not too long later, because a lot of lay people forget things very quickly, ask them what they were doing. And you'll find it was a special time for them. They were receiving your metta. But the third way of doing metta meditation, which I always also do, which again I found very, very helpful, is much more just an assistance to the breath meditation, anapanasati. Remember the first time I did this, I was teaching just a weekend retreat over in Australia, and as I was doing my breath meditation, I thought, why not combine the breath and metta meditation? So when I was watching my breath, I gave loving kindness towards my breath. In the same way that many people can give loving kindness to inanimate objects. Sometimes I see people when they get a new car or a motorbike, they wash it, they clean it, and they even give it a name. You know, like John or Sanat or whatever. So you can, human beings, we can give loving kindness to inanimate objects. So if you can do that to a car, surely you can do that to your breath. So I look upon my breath, I imagine it as a being. I look upon this breath as someone who served me ever since I was born, bringing oxygen into my body and taking all of the carbon dioxide and all the other waste products out. It's been doing this for so many years, and I've never shown gratitude towards it. So I thank the breath for looking after me, without fail, all these years. And I developed this beautiful feeling of warmth and loving kindness towards my breath. Whether it's a short breath or a long breath, a rough breath or a smooth breath, have a feeling of metta towards my breath. And if you have a feeling of metta towards your breath, you find your breath is so easy to watch. It does not disappear. The mind does not wander off. Because when you have metta towards the breath becomes very delightful. So again, if you have the full awareness of the breath, but it hasn't become a delightful breath yet, you haven't aroused piti sukha with the breath, try giving loving kindness to your breath. You're not abandoning your breath, you're just changing your attitude towards it, to be kind and caring towards your breath. I did mention this earlier. Because of the illusion of a self, because we think the body, and in particular our breath, belong to us, because we think we own these things, that is why we tend to control them. When we control them, we cannot let them be, to relax and become peaceful. Loving kindness changes the attitude. The breath is no longer looked upon as a slave or a servant, someone to order around. Instead, it's looked upon like a dear brother or sister, a great friend. You don't tell what to do, but you give kindness towards. And I found the people I give lots and lots of kindness towards always like to stay with me. The people I order around want to leave as soon as possible. So my breath, if I order it around, it wants to hide from me. That's why I lose awareness of the breath. Because it's had such a difficult time with me in the past. As soon as it sees me coming, it goes somewhere else and hides. That's why the breath disappears. If I've always been so kind to my breath, if I always looked after it and cared for it, then my breath doesn't disappear at all. As soon as it sees me coming, it runs towards me. Ah, Ajahn Brahm, we had such a wonderful time last time. What are you doing? I'm going to hang out with you today. And that's why my breath stays, because of kindness. It delights in my company. So if you give loving kindness towards your breathing, you find it stays. And it develops a beautiful Piti Sukha. And the first time I remember doing that, the jhanas were just so easy. That was actually a time. It was just so easy, just all day, even at night. You know, sometimes you can have dreams. And I dreamt of nimitta. And as soon as you dreamt of nimitta, of course you know what happened next. So I didn't sleep much that night, but I had a wonderful time. So this was actually, that was the first time it just worked so amazingly powerful. And I realised it's because, even me, that sometimes you tend to control the breath, and loving kindness stops that controlling in its tracks. We have metta towards the breath, it's just so peaceful and so easy, and you get delightful breath, and it's a wonderful way of meditating. So that is a meditation I really encourage. Of those three, that's the one I'd encourage you to do the most, because you've all done lots of breath meditation, so you've got that far. You don't need to go back to the beginning and do metta, may all beings be happy and well. Or even changing halfway, you get delightful breath and then do metta. Carry on with your breath, but add that magic ingredient of loving kindness. When you get to not delightful breath, so when you get to the stage of full awareness of the breath, imagine the breath as a being. Give it loving kindness. Full on metta. Just like you give metta towards a dog in your monastery, and the dog will not part from you. It'll always be there. When it sees you, it wags its tail. When your breath sees you, like the breath wags its tail, and will always be with you, with delight, and you'll be able to take that into nimittas and jhanas very easy. So that's the way in which I've been practicing Maitri Bhavana, and how it does lead into deeper meditation. It has all these wonderful side effects of being a kind and caring person. Animals don't harm you. You can be in the jungle and be quite safe. All those things are byproducts, but the main thing is it does help you gain the nimittas, get into jhanas, and also get the enlightenment as well. So please cultivate Maitri, with the breath or separately, however you wish to do it. It's a great meditation. So that's this morning's talk on Maitri Bhavana.